So, our topic today is case studies and market research. And I am Laura Weathered, an artist, visual artist, as well as executive director of the Near Northwest Arts Council, which is based in Chicago. And joining me is Kiela Smith, who is a co-partner, co-founder of Artist Design The Future. And so
along with Laura as the co-founder, yes. By the way.
So we are forming a worker-owned co-op to develop shared ownership opportunities for artists. So that's both space, mixed-use buildings, as well as cultural programs.
Laura, could I get you to move your camera up just a little bit so we could see your whole beautiful face?
Okay.
Perfect.
Looking at my page so I don't see me. Sorry. I turned out. Oh, let's go back to this. All right. So our purpose in the presentation today is to share our experience in using case studies to inform when you're writing a business plan for future projects, or to serve as components of a feasibility study. They kind of work hand in hand. And Kiela is going to kick us off.
Okay, sorry about that, y'all. So can you scroll up just a little bit?
Yeah.
Thank you. So when we think about local development, space development, whether mixed use or for whatever purpose, it's any real estate development, whether we're talking about artists, non-artists, just kind of the general real estate development industry, field, landscape. I'm just curious. I mean, I know it's on there, but when you think about that, what's the first thing people think about in developing real estate? Like, what's the first thing pops in your mind?
Just shout it out.
Yeah.
Deep pockets.
Exactly.
And long money. And also I think about, like, it's politics, like political relationships. That's what I should say. Political relationships and long money, deep pockets.
All right. So you hit, it looks like somebody put something in the chat. You hit the nail on the head. Unfortunately, Natalie's laughing. Unfortunately, that's often the main driver, the only driver. ROI, return on investment, and folks who we have to go to get that money. However, there's some models developing and successful that have done it in creative ways that you might or might not be aware of. The acronym, if you've ever seen the acronym FIRE, it stands for finance, insurance, real estate. And in the end, with most folks, you go to a bank, you talk to those politicians you mentioned, Maximilian, everyone's first question tends to be, well, do you have the money? Or how much is it going to cost? Or what are you going to make? So it's always revolving around money, not the whole ecosystem of what developing real estate can be, in my view, should be. Some affordable housing, which are rentals, use something called tax credits to create those properties where investors with the deep pockets and the long money invest. They're motivated to take the credits, the tax credits on their tax returns. However, that model prevents ownership of any kind by the residents in those properties. An example from the arts field is a company called, or an organization, nonprofit called Art Space. And they've created stuff all around the country. They're based in Minneapolis, and they have these kind of cookie cutter models where they come into the community. They do, in my view, a cursory community engagement, but they leverage those same tax credits. They build, or at least they leverage relationships in those cities politically for city and state participation. The challenge with tax credits is it unnecessarily, in our view, inflates the cost of those developments because you have a lot of necessary legal things that have to happen in order to facilitate the tax credits existing and being used. And then the rentals use sometimes is restricted. And of course, there's tends to be the annual qualifications of the financials of the people. So there's not much self-determination, if any, in there, except that art spaces buildings are specific for creatives. Another example is Toronto Artscape, which is a nonprofit developer that develops and owns cultural properties. And excuse me, there are some arts organizations that share space, management, and ownership. So there's a variety of ways to do it. What I want to emphasize for the piece I'm talking about is to think about who your team is. Think about the players you want to have be a part of. And of course, we think about this all the time. We're developing a related advisory board with varying skills to help support that. But let's say, for example, you're partnering with a developer, or you have an architect on board, or designers. You want to look for people who are congruent with the values you have and the values you want to develop in your space, who perhaps can think outside the box and not just this automatic, oh, ROI, or, oh, what am I, not that they shouldn't be paid, definitely, so should we, right? But ones who value community and believe in and live into the concepts of building equity. So here's a graphic that we want to show you that's called the 5 lenses. Thank you to Duo Development, which is a developer here that we have learned from and collaborated with in some ways, I guess you could say. And they brought up this concept which visualizes the idea of economics are not the only definer of a successful development. So if you look here, there's all these other areas that we believe are important. And there are certain, designers and architects and developers who value these as well. Some of them more than others. If you notice, it's like a little volume level under each one. So as you think about what you're doing, like how important are these different things within your development? The challenge is, and the frustration is, many developers, many politicians, city, civic, folks who you want or need to support your projects, they always default to the first one. Maybe you get a little like ethics or culture in there, perhaps, if you're lucky. So economics being obviously the financials, the benefits, the costs, the return on investment, as well as I'd add that we are also looking at the benefit to the finances of folks who own the properties, if you're talking about ownership, because it creates more than just that return, that money. It creates a foundation for families, individuals, young folks, elders, in an intergenerational way to build and strengthen their own personal foundation, which then helps them build their own wealth for themselves or their families. So the economics really is more than just what's in it for me, which is how a lot of investors and developers address and approach a development. So the ecology, are there considerations about, and we want to propose that there's actually 6 lenses, not just 5. I'll tell you the 6th one at the end, but sustainability, like the long-term sustainability from the affordability perspective, from the green environmental perspective. So renewable energy, how is the landscaping being done? Are native plants being used? Are we using renewable energy? Where can we perhaps find credits or other value for the environment, for the community, and for within the building itself? Some of that also can lower costs over time. Then the third lens there is technology, how that can help improve qualities of life. When we're talking about communities that are disinvested or have a long history of just really being not considered, technology can really turn the tables, getting that access to quality fast enough and accessible. Let's say broadband, for example, how that moves through the building and how people can use it, and even other opportunities, perhaps business-wise, for them to collaborate or even for themselves personally. And culturally, given what we're on right now, obviously that's an important high-level one for if you're talking about creatives, and not only that it serves creatives, but that how is it designed? Is it designed thinking of the owners in mind, or is it just a cookie cutter thing where, oh, well, this is what we did before, right? So that's when you're having those considerations and those conversations with the team you build or the folks who you're convening to be a part of this in mind or in body. How are you engaging the community? Where are you engaging those people? Meaning in the process, not waiting till the end where then they just become a component who gets to benefit from this thing that they're so privileged that you created for them. But they actually have, and I'm being quite sarcastic, but they actually have a input at the early stages of the planning so that it really meets the needs of the people who ultimately will live there, whether owners or renters, or maybe some combination or transition that way, because maybe in some cases people can't be owners initially. How do we design and address for that on design levels and financial levels? And how do we reflect our own values in what these spaces ultimately become? And so ethics being about thinking, when you're talking about this wonderful space on One Unicorn Lane, I can't get over that name. It's too funny and aligned. That how what we're seeking to do will impact the community. The value it's going to bring, are we looking at it being something that's going to bring and enhance equity and justice and fairness to impact the good of the community as a whole and individuals? Or are you working with a developer who just wants to buy land and develop condos that max out the market that only a hair of people can actually afford, which means either it's not coming from within the community, people are coming in and we're not building ownership. And then the last one, we got to make a new visual, Laura. The last one is accessibility. So are we taking into account in design, in sustainability, in accessibility, how people with disabilities get to be owners or renters, users, visitors in these spaces? And are we thinking about how these spaces are designed to meet their needs so they are welcomed and they are integrated just like everybody else? And part of that, I will say, includes having them making sure they're at the table from the beginning as well. So did I miss anything, Laura?
No, that sounds great.
So I'm going to pass it back to Laura to show you some other stuff about these case studies.
Okay. So when we look at other projects, this is the research that we're doing for case studies. And it's a way of doing market research, of finding examples of partnerships. It can be success stories as well as failures. Somehow we learn from mistakes as well as success. But what we're urging you to do is to look at other projects, paying attention to the scale of the project. So we ask, what's your problem question? who owns or has control over the project. We're obviously coming from the point of view of artists having control because we've been whitewashed or place made right out of existence, and we're very interested in keeping the culture of the community and maintaining control. Who's the catalyst or the spark plug of a project? I was surprised when I was initially doing development that oftentimes there was one person, either at the city level, local level, affordable housing level. It might have been an architect. Oftentimes it was an artist or an artist collective who was the catalyst, who said, you know, we need a little bit something different than what's available on the market. And they start gathering information in order to make their project live. I think it's really beneficial to look at successful developments and figure out what is cost effective, where their money came from, how many units are there, what are the unit costs. When we did our artist housing project 22 years ago, construction costs were $70 a square foot. In 2022-23, construction costs are $250 to $300 a square foot. So it's just kind of amazing what you have to deal with market conditions. Who can be partners in your project? Fellow artists, designers, architects, educators, people in health and wellness, retail, as well as commercial artists. And then you want to pay attention to what are the models for ownership and or development. And one of the things that I want to share is oftentimes when I was doing case studies, I look at as many projects as I could find and answer these questions and just capture the information in a paragraph. You don't need more than that. But Artscape in Toronto has a wonderful case study that they got funding from the local foundation, and it's a whole book. And it's kind of, this is a project that they worked in partnership with a developer, and they describe it as a condo within a condo. And so they were the representative that had experience developing historic warehouse kinds of projects, an old railroad barn and others. But they worked in partnership with a developer for a much bigger project in order to reflect the community, to have more control over affordability. It offers both rentals and ownership opportunities. And I want to flip to this just to, so this is a very elaborate case study. And frankly, non-for-profits and arts organizations will share a lot of information about their project. Typical real estate developers, they have pretty pictures, a little summary of who financed it, who their partners were, and then they flip it over to the property managers and the rental rates. And they don't share any more than that. And so this is interesting to page through this report. And understand, we're not going to go through this, but it's an example of a case study about a project that was long-term in planning, but because the non-for-profit joined the development team, they were able to create an additional 55,000 square feet of this new construction without government financing, and government financing slows anything down. And so it was a win-win for the developer who's looking for profits on part of it, but agreeing to work with a non-for-profit in order to have a bigger project and kind of a more verified. I don't know. In Chicago, we have a lot of recovery money coming into the city that is supposed to help community-based non-for-profits, but the city is still looking for very deep pockets, and they don't want to go with any development unless it's a sure slam dunk. And so I think that although this project opened in 2010, it's a good example of working with a developer and finding common kind of. The whole project isn't affordable, but the part that Artscape is contributing is making the whole project reflect the community better. So, so it is a case study with lots of detail. The other projects that I've kind of looked at over the years includes Jackson, Mississippi. And so Jackson Medical Mall is a project that a foundation created, and Partners for Livable Communities really likes to profile projects to do their case studies that share, you know, who the partners, what the cost, what the values of the community, where they were successful. So they track a lot of nuts and bolts. And they had an artist on their board of directors that gave them some key advice about relating. Oh, I should say that their project was taking over a vacant big box store. Their intent was to create a medical mall, but because artists were on the board of directors and contributed to a feasibility study that took them 2 years to produce, they really integrated a lot of the community resources, the notion of the community, the value of wellness, health and wellness and culture. And I want to go back to the, sorry. Let's see. Okay. 10 years ago. So they're in a water crisis. Jackson is the capital of the state. And so this is where Jackson has been in the news lately. But the good news about Jackson is the community in the last 10, 15 years has really bought into co-op ownership, shared ownership, collaborating with each other to build business, to relate to their farming in the community. So it's great to see a snapshot of a foundation in the community building a center, but then the impact of community organizing and cooperatives when they're facing, you know, huge missteps with water service. And so because they're so well organized, they can get the federal funding they need to rebuild their water supply system. So they're a network of cooperatives that are worker-owned and self-managed enterprises. So this is kind of a key strategy that Kiela and I are working with in Chicago. Washington, D.C. and the Cultural Development Corporation is a group that straddles both affordable housing and space for art. And again, it's a case study that's written up by the Partners for Livable Communities. But one of the things that you want to pay attention to when you look at these projects is who funded them. And oftentimes it's foundations that are on a national level that will recognize your kind of progressive approach to community development. And so it's always important to kind of read through, you know, who's giving funding and under what circumstances. And it also gives you some kind of lessons learned on how to propose your project. So you'll find lots of language there as well. The Torpedo Factory in Alexandria, Virginia is kind of a destination art studio. It was an old torpedo factory, absolutely huge. I think a foundation was an early adopter of this project, and they were up and running for a while and they closed it down and renovated it. But it has become a very effective partner in the African-American community in Alexandria. And so where it was promoted as a tourist destination and a place for artists to work and host classes, it's now engaged in tourism for historic Alexandria. And so it's really quite interesting to me to see over a period of time how the community engages with buildings in the environment that are tourists. So it took them a while to involve the community in their project. And I found quite a lot of information in the Urban Manufacturing Alliance, and they created a white paper and they worked with the local university. Well, it's a national organization. They often work with LISC, which is also a national organization. And so this paper profiles quite a few industrial projects with creatives demonstrating ways of reactivating the industrial sector of your community, rural, small city, or large. And there's great examples. And interesting is, rather than basing job development in festivals and special events, entertainment, where kind of the jobs are low paying, when you move into the manufacturing sector, the average job was $50,000 and up. So we're not talking about just technology and web-based work, but actually making things. So I found that to be a very fruitful resource. Springboard for the Arts is based in Minnesota, and they've got great toolkits for change, all about artists working in the community, how the community can hire artists, and how artists impact community development. There are 2 resources here that we list: a business plan for freelancers, how to think about your business, questions to answers. You're fleshing out your business plan and doing market research. We use this Business Models Inc. There's a business model canvas that fits all on one page that asks you questions about who's your competitor, what niche in the market are you trying to fill. It's a very commonsensical. You don't have to hire a consultant. You can kind of fill in the blanks, and what you can't fill in, you can do research and explore. And
Can I just say something about that one?
absolutely.
Oh, I'm off video. That business model canvas, and the creative canvas, what's nice about those, I think, for people who don't think so linear, it's nice because of the way it's laid out and the way the different sections, like how you can complete them. It's just really, it's a nice change from the traditional, and the fact that it's on one page makes it a little more approachable.
So we want to make this PDF available to everybody. So it is a Google Doc, but I think, Liza, what we can do is upload this to the pop-up research menu, but we want to open it up for discussion and questions.
It's interesting that you mentioned Artscape, because I was part of the Switching Station Artist Lofts. And there was so much turbulence with the developer that came to the West Side, the politics that happened with the alderman, and making sure that African-American businesses were contracted to supply services to build that development. There was a lot of, I don't know, back and forth on loss of interest by Artscape. So once that development finally got off the ground, Mayor Daley came out and did the dedication, you know, photo ops happened. It was turned over to Hosted Management Company. And to this day, it was supposed to be like, what, 15 years? And I had moved in 2003. So it's beyond that 15 years. But when I left out of that development at the end of 2009, it was being, I don't know, the way the management went, you would not think it's an art development. And the people that they were putting in, well, they had told us that you better get a list established of all the artists that are interested in getting in, because they're going to just start putting people in those apartments. And it lost its place, you know, as an art development. Art space pretty much, you know, when Dean, one of the directors, left, I had a relationship in terms of business with him, you know, reporting and doing some, you know, work that they needed me to do in Chicago as a consultant. Once he resigned and left and moved on, they pretty much wiped their hands of that development. And it's like, you got that building for $1. You know, you came in and you made these promises of what was going to happen. And all of the artists felt like when we first came in that it was a thing of abandonment, because, you know, we were like a fish in a bowl, you know, and that was one of, I think one of their first developments that happened here in Chicago, you know, in 2003. But again, there's a lot of political turmoil about that development, you know, and I don't know. So the artists that are still there, you know, that were like, that came in 20 years ago, they're pretty much, you know, those that don't move because they have so much time. I mean, they're invested into being where they are.
Right. Yeah.
But it was a big turnover of artists leaving out of that because it just was not conducive, the neighborhood and stuff, where it could be expanded to, you know, even being a part of Chicago Artist Month at the time. But I just remember just coming in and being a part of that whole, you know, project, especially from the political end all the way down just to the artists that are trying to live there and be part of community, and how we were part of the new communities program list, and how that went and how that was shaped, you know. But there were other artist developments around there that are more successful, but it seems like artists come into these developments into parts of the city that are disinvested, you know, and then we're put in there. And that we go back to that term you use with art washing, you know, and placing artists into these developments. I took a road trip and went up to, what is it? There's another artscape up in Elston, Illinois, you know, and another one up in Milwaukee that they were building in those areas. And, but I took one over, they have one in Maryland that was pretty successful because it's part of an art district, you know, and there's connectors. When they build these places and they're not connected to the bigger art district, I think they become problematic with the way management handles them. And even this building here, once it left your hands, and it's just thankful, I'm really thankful that the other minority owners are artists and they're not just the developers, because the developers were trying to flip this property. What, the first year we were in, it was trying to dump this property. When he came in and all these promises after community-led charrettes, conversations, the buy-in of the aldermen, and then once we're in, ribbon cutting with another mayor, you know, and you know how it went. Now all of a sudden, all of us in here were producing our financials again because they wanted to flip this building and move on and build something down the way, you know. And then those LLCs that were, you don't even know who's on their board anymore, that are owners of the properties. You know, I think you alluded to that earlier about the developers, but they put these LLCs together so they can kind of manipulate their own portfolios. And the art developments are part of their portfolios. And this project is working because of its being in a commercial district and the artists that are dedicated to making a art district. I think it works. But Cornerstone over there, it's more of just a housing, you know, development. And it didn't, it's only, I think, one downstairs handicap accessible apartment over there, you know, and the stairs are unbelievable. Just the way they're developing it without the needs or doing an assessment with the artists that are going to be a part of these developments beyond being interviewed to get in there.
Well, I knew the person who lived in that unit you're speaking of, and that person was not a person with disabilities. So how they didn't prioritize and market to that community for that unit.
Yeah, that entry that's right across from that community room that they have over there.
The building on the corner, there's one, there's an accessible unit also at ground level.
Yeah, and the guys that are in the one at 613, they're not handicap accessible, but I did make a note of the number of units that are accessible, but you know, they're not. And even here in this building, there's how many accessible buildings? I mean, lofts.
There's quite a few. I mean, they met the limitations that the city requires. And part of what they do is they make it convertible. If there's a person with disabilities applying and qualifying, so they have to be an artist, they have to be income qualifications, you know, and then, you know, if they haven't discouraged them by that third tier, they can, you know, the windows have to be opened from a certain way, light activation for doorbells, or there's all kinds of things. The parts of the bathroom and the kitchen aren't convertible. They have to meet ADA requirements. But there's, I think because they don't market the units to a disabled population, they're not getting applicants. And people with disabilities are pointed towards institutional living. And so by connecting with the different associations, people with disabilities, you can, it's easy to gain access to that community, but you do want to involve them early in the design of the project so that their needs that aren't in building regulations are recognized. So it's a problem that exists, but there's not a lot of acknowledgement of it. And I think more and more that we hear from people with disabilities, the more the built community can react to those needs. But I have to say, you know, everybody's kind of developing cookie cutter, whether it's market rate, you know, in my neighborhood, it's all luxury condos. And so everybody's trying to capture that market and just leaving affordable housing in the dust. And that's part of the problem that we need to solve on a community level, is invest locally.
Yeah.
Don't go to the big banks that don't invest in your neighborhood. Invest in the credit unions and co-ops. And we're Chicago is just learning that there's a wealth of building expertise in minority-owned construction. And so there's new project development with minority contractors who have been here for decades, but finally the market is being a little tiny bit more responsive. I can't say the door is open, and I can't say that there's a lot of progressive thinking.
Well, to that end, I just have to say, I see you put art space in the chat.
I did.
And then I just put our Facebook page in the chat. But what I wanted to say is that one of the things that it's never highlighted, because I think a lot of people's assumptions are just everything's a rental, or they don't even think about it. So like this description, even art space claiming that they're the leading nonprofit real estate developer for arts. They never say in there the leading rental real estate developer.
Right.
Exactly.
People aren't drawing that distinction and calling out the self-determination that a lot of artists really want. I just learned of another artist I know. I went to his closing show a few days ago. He's like, yeah, my wife and I, we bought this house. So I'm hearing now every now and then a sprinkling. They tend to be married artists who have like an additional income or a spouse buying single family homes, but they're still in these silos of self, where what they really want is to be in community together. And that can be achieved in these rental properties, but when you don't have that ownership, that's where you have the switching station experiences you talked about, Alpha, and some of these others where there's no control, there's no self-determination to meet the needs of the community it's supposed to serve. And so it just kind of like is out of their hands. And it becomes very frustrating. So I think it for us, it's foundational. Ownership is a foundational component that we really want to beat the drum of.
I like when Maximilian came on, she was talking about your development that you want to see happen. What is it? More of a retreat, more of a, what were you looking?
It's something that I believe I conceived. It's so funny. Sometimes I think I've got a completely unique idea, and then I discover actually someone else did something exactly like what I thought of many years before. So I'll just say I believe it's something new, but my idea is for it to be a lifestyle community, artist based, and not only so like the core is artists, but also including those people who are working in relation to artists. So for example, you know, like developers who build websites, you know, writers, like I have a loose idea of artistry because I see art in many types of creations. So that includes like supportive, like artist supportive. So if someone is not an artist, but they build canvases, or they, you know, build things that artists use, or they build, you know, crafts or tools that artists use. So it's like, that's the core development. And I think of it as a lifestyle community. I have in mind like roadmaps, and I have in mind like an exit strategy. So it's not meant for someone necessarily to come and live there forever, but there could be a track or a program for someone who desires that. I want it also to be like an end of life retirement community, because I hope that I get to live to be an old lady, and I would like to be the old lady by the pool, surrounded by other artists. Yeah, I'll save the seat
Yeah.
next to you, sister. Next to me. Yeah, so you know, what I envision is a roadmap. So when people come in, there's like a roadmap, and they're artists. So it includes like we have built in like shows, exhibitions, mentorship, all the things, so that this is like a safe launch pad. And maybe that roadmap is a 3-year or an 18-month or a 5-year roadmap with different touchstones, depending on what is appropriate for that individual. And then there, you know, that's my idea, is that this is a place like a lifestyle incubator where people can fill in the gaps, get what they need, and live in a safe place and evolve from there. But also like a retreat, yes, because I do have in mind community things like communal dining, daily yoga, these types of things that I found really beneficial and nourishing to my soul when I was a part of it. Fireplace, cocktails at 5 every day, and we had the sparkling white grape too. But this is the idea. So it's like a retreat lifestyle community with a clear roadmap, so that to launch people and really help them grow. So it doesn't become a crutch or anything where someone gets complacent, but rather it's an inspiring place for artists to come together and make important work. And part of it is also making sure that those people get the eyeballs that they need, and really to help people grow.
Cool. It's great. So we share in your vision. We're purposely intergenerational. We're also purposely artists and creatives, in the sense that, it's not just artists creating products or performing, but all of the related services that contribute in that creative ecosystem. So it's playwrights, as well as costume designers, as well as we kind of let people define what their creativity is, and what we're looking for is a more flexible living environment where we can design it ourselves to suit our needs, flexible enough if our family grows or shrinks that we could, kind of adjust the space and the overhead, that there's supportive services, kind of intentional community, the same idea that you have, where the community defines what it wants, shared space for yoga, aging in place services. What else? So yes, there's a lot of people thinking in the same direction, that, where is my forever home that can change as my needs change in the future, but it gives me the safety and security to be who I want to be. And So it was interesting in doing the intake for different artist housing projects that there were women who they're not seniors yet, but they're at an advanced stage in their career where they're looking at what am I going to do next? And now I'm going to have the freedom to do what I want, but they also want to live with a certain amount of security and neighborliness. So they're not left alone, but they're done raising their kids. Their career is kind of at its peak, and they're anticipating, well, what am I going to do with the next 20 or 30 years, which is kind of an exciting place to be.
Are you using me as a case study?
I have to say that I moved into my place 22 years ago. So that's the first 22. I got another 22 years to go. So
Well, and it's also, this is just, you know, in thinking even about what you're wanting to do, Maximilian, is a great opportunity too. And I think about it so much. Like I have, my kids are all in their 20s, and I have one who just turned 20, and he's all into the arts and gardening. And what a blessing it would have been for me as a 20-something in art school or doing my art to be able to live and buy in a community like that. I always had the vision to do it, but I didn't know how. And I was kind of scared, and I didn't have it. Even though my dad did a little investing, he didn't like take me by the hand and say, this is what you do. But even if he did, I still would have been alone. And so that's another reason the ethic of intergenerational for us in particular is important. You've got that nice mix of really being able to build a true community. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm excited
love-
about what you're envisioning. It's super.
Me too. Well, I'm so glad to be here because I was like, how am I going to figure this all out? It's been my dream for, probably since I was a girl. Definitely before I even came into high school, I was a girl when I came up with this idea. And I've just held on to it.
Get your rain boots and big girl panties, because it's been mine for a long time too. And then I saw Laura lead something, and I went to her and I said, would you help me? And she was like, sure. I didn't know I didn't really know what I was asking. I'm like, oh, you're in this for the long haul.
I do want to share this in case it's insightful or helpful. But I was further inspired about 8 years ago. I was invited. There's this social club. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called the Jonathan Club. It's very old. It's like, I think it's over 100 years old or something. It's a super old social club. It's called the Jonathan Club. It's a secret social club, but it's, you can find it online. But it's very old. And the thing about the Jonathan Club is they have them all over the world. So if you're a member of the Jonathan Club, you always have a home to go to. And it's always clandestine. There's never any sign or anything. But I was invited by a member, and I went, and I just felt so welcomed. And then they were like, you should become a member. And I started looking, and I thought, this is amazing, because I really did feel like I had a home, even though everyone had just met me. And I thought, this is like, I would love to create this. So my idea is to create one and then to have them all over the world, because I would love to have a network of these communes all over, and you're a member of all of them, and you have homes all over. And so that was my my further refinement, because at first I was thinking of just like a commune, but I hadn't in mind like the membership, the community aspect. So that was kind of my model, was the Jonathan Club. Because I really like the attitude of their community.
So when
she
mother
talks about community, because people still do communes. I remember like 70s, like early college, that commune living, like
I say the word commune because I literally envisioned individual bungalows. So people have their own, like a compound. So there's like, not like necessarily one giant building, but maybe there is, but little separate ones, just the whole environment, kind of like a small village or something. So I guess, you know, I think of a commune because of the communal dining and the yoga and that kind of stuff. But I suppose now we call those retreats, huh?
Okay.
Oh, you say that, and like Laura mentioned something earlier, intentional living, like there are or intentional community. There are communities where everyone's independent financially. So like in my mind, a commune is where everyone is, and it's often looked at, you know, as so underground and subterranean, kind of pejoratively even referred to now, but where everyone lives together in the same space. Maybe everybody has a different bedroom or something, but what we're talking about is where people are in community, but they're independent.
Yes.
Mhm. You have
Yes.
your own private space.
Yes.
But you have shared facilities that are designed by, you know, the residents, the co-owners, because part of it is you got to pay for this extra space and you got to figure out how that ownership and liability, et cetera. Co-housing is a good example of intentional community where that private life is respected, but there's community can be shared workspace, shared studio space, shared green space. They design the communities like a small village with a community room that, or a community building. It could be, you know,
An amphitheater.
yeah, it could have bed and breakfast space. It could have a performing arts space. It could have, you know, offices. It could have health facility. It could be whatever it is that the community wants. I think one of the interesting things about co-housing is that architects got involved in promoting this because the people said, this is what we want to do. And so the architects designed the space to facilitate community. So part of it is not building garages and all these parking lots, but having shared green space. You only need one lawnmower with 20 folks. You don't need 20 lawnmowers. And so it uses that kind of thinking. And it's intentionally intergenerational for an older couple that doesn't have kids, but they don't want to live in a senior only community. It's also very good for families with young children because that kind of gets shared by agreement, by negotiation. But when you grow up in a community like that, you got lots of adults besides your parents to kind of interact with. And so there's a lot more opportunity for creative learning, and just sharing experience is much, much richer for everybody involved.
There's,
Introvert,
may I
even
ask?
like
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
the people who are naturally introverted like going into these communities because they have the option of being social if they want to, but their kids have the opportunity of engaging with a larger community and they don't impose their kind of whatever fears they have of social anxiety. You know, it's like good for both.
Yeah, I have, there is something I wanted to share, and I would love to know how I should describe it. You know, the other reason why I use the word commune is because, so just a little background. So I had two friends come visit me yesterday, and I was so impressed when I went to visit them in Colorado because they created a commune with a big, beautiful home and all this land and a stream. We all took baths in the stream in the morning. It was very impressive. Their whole community, it was like a well-oiled machine, meal times and all this. But one of the things that we talked about when they visited was how the reason why it worked so well is because every person in the home was a part, had their role. And the reason why I use the word commune is it kind of refers back to when I was saying there will be a roadmap for everyone who's a part of the community, because everyone should have their role within the community so they feel like they own it. You know, so like somebody's role might be like, you know, painting or whatever. So that was the other reason why I use the word commune and not retreat or resort, because I always think of retreats and resorts are very like self-intentional. It's about me, my rehabilitation. I'm not here to contribute or participate. I'm here to be served. And what I was envisioning was that a place where I have this role and the thing that I do is something that I love and this is my contribution. And it gives that feeling of ownership and therefore care about this community, really participating in it. And so that was the other reason why I used this.
With much due respect, with much due respect, I respect communal. I mean that communal living is, you know, I respect that. I just like, okay, I was introduced to communal living in the, but I come from a family of landowners. You know, we had property growing up and, you know, single family home, but we lived on a farm, right? You know, my parents owned farms. They were sharecropping. They were, you know, part of, you know, so when you said communal, you know, I remember being in a farming community because I'm talking about now the 50s, growing up when we had a house here, and everybody's on this huge lot, but, you know, everybody did come together. You know what I mean? For communal. So I mean that in a good way, not a negative way. And even so, I do come from the Black hippie experience. I come from a cultural experience and I come from being an artist having those experiences. So I didn't mean it or say it in a negative way, but I like
no, not at all. I just tease, I joke because I know it's I know it's like not of the moment. I mean, like
it is of the moment, trust me,
is
it's of the moment. Communal living is of the moment because we're going to have to go and resort to something for our own existence, you know, and having more of these conversations of co-op living, you know, that Artist Design the Future is having these conversations about, you know, being part of co-ops, you know, and cooperative work and responsibility is one of the, you know, Nguza Sabas of Kwanzaa, right? And so we're starting this new year with understanding the depth of what, you know, collective work and responsibility means, right? And in housing, you know, and it's much needed, you know, even here, I live at the Bronzeville Artist Lofts, you know, we have a sense of community here. We don't engage in going in and out of each other's lofts. We respect our privacies. But when it comes to maybe in the summer, meal sharing, you know, I mean, that's a different level of social, you know, socialism within the space, but it works. You know, when we do events, it works. We collectively do things together. You know what I mean? We're not an organization. Each of us are 16 individual businesses as artists that live and work in a shared space. And then we do have shared, when Laura and the developers were working on this project, they made sure that there was community space on the second and third floors so that if we don't want to always be just in our lofts, we have a space to go to. We have a community, I mean, a sculpture garden that belongs to the gallery, but it's creating outdoor space collectively, you know, working within the art community. And then, you know, so when I say communal living, we do commune, everybody chips in with the Bronzeville trolley tours in our art district, promoting it, you know, and helping to cultivate this district. But we're in an urban environment that is part of now the Legacy District, with Bronzeville being made into a heritage district. And there's a lot of attention on the kinds of development like these that are happening in, you know, but I'm still looking at farming communities and how, you know, farming communities, especially in the South for African Americans, that are pulling together those resources and those dollars, because a lot of times in the city, the urban artists, we don't have the dollars to invest in or the credit to be able to establish purchasing land and investing into developments. But, you know, I'm really interested in looking at land trust, and how to invest as part of the LLCs where, you invest into properties, and encouraging others to invest into properties that are controlled by a trust, so that other people can invest into those, looking at that investment level. But that's something I'm going to explore this year with other farmers that are building communities with, as art communities within their farming land. If that makes sense, I guess.
There isn't EV Prec on the list, Laura.
Did you ask me what? Or you asked me?
Oh,
Laura is EV Prec, even though it's not rural, it's a model for
in
community,
Oakland for, community ownership. So
multiple.
I can add that. Let me think. I could put it in the chat.
Someone's telling me, are you sure you don't have it on the list already? You don't?
You know,
I
I
see.
don't think so.
No. Mm-mm. No.
So the Oakland is doing a lot of stuff. It's the Sustainable Law Center Economic Solidarity is looking at worker-owned and worker-owned non-for-profits. And so they're showing people, they're demonstrating, and they have so many resources online where they have bylaws and development strategies, et cetera, in how community can control real estate. And the East Bay EPREC, what is that? It stands for, doesn't it? The East Bay Real Estate Cooperative. And so it's kind of like a consumer co-op. You invest in it and you own shares and you get to vote on the projects. And they're in the process of, I think there's like $8 million that they've invested in their local real estate. So they're working at that education level and cooperative. The nice thing about cooperatives is that you have the benefits of ownership, the buy-in. You don't have to come up with 20% equity to buy into it. You're one of many people owning this real estate together. And if you want to opt out, you don't have to, you sell your share to somebody else. Their share reimburses you for what you've put into the project and you move on. So that idea of having a roadmap to cooperative membership and ownership, I think that's really an interesting thing to think about and develop and share.
So as we were looking at, I was looking at an update for what's happening in Sacramento. And on the 25th, which is tomorrow, the Big Dream 102 Acres Community Update, where the City Council Mayor Vang and we met as a committee. She had several sessions that were open to the public for what to do with this 102 acres in South Sacramento and the future community investment in that area. And the city paid something like $12 million for that property. And we proposed, we meaning the coalition that met with her, proposed a museum and performing arts campus to happen as part of that acreage. And so now they're having these community meetings to present a timeline for when, after, they're gonna do feedback for all of the groups that met with her. And, Public Research Station submitted a feasibility proposal to the museum to be able to help pull these case studies and everything together, because that's part of our next step. But the area that they're looking at was an old Job Corps site, which closed down in something like the 1970s. It was property of like California Highway Patrol, and then it became the Job Corps facility, and it's been vacant since 1978. And so that one building we were looking at, and they said it's probably like $2 million of just to look at going in and maintenance, because it's just been sitting there empty for all this time. But anyway, the next steps are happening now with this project. And I was listening to City Council 2 weeks ago, and they were saying, we're going to take all the homeless population and put them over in Meadowview. You got 102 acres, right? And kind of, I don't know, I felt some kind of way about that in terms of affordable housing, and just put a population that you don't want to see and deal with, and pitting that, paradigm against the arts, and, what could happen with the housing and recreation, anyway, that's going on. And then they were looking at this as being a temporary shelter or comprehensive siting plan to address homelessness in this plan. So what does that look like? We don't know, but this is where we are in the planning, being heard at least, and knowing that this kind of land and opportunity is there to build, and have that collective thought of, yes, this is an opportunity to propose something with artist housing, you know what I mean, or residencies, or, just to expand the vision beyond the museum as its own space and a performing arts complex, but what the community also, and the impact that it will make on the community is another interesting conversation that we have to shape in our proposal for this area, because they're going to definitely pit this homeless issue that the city is having, the state is having, with what's going on with this 102-acre opportunity for the museum.
Is that the Job Corps that was by the light rail? I mean,
Yes.
yeah, that was open in the early 2000s. Were bought several times by different corporations. It's a tea for another day, not on Zoom. But yeah, that parcel is, I used to go there in the early 2000s and I worked there. That parcel is humongous. Like, even walking back to the back edge of it, it's huge. So yeah, that's
102 acres. And yes, I know where that Job Corps building is on Meadowview Road. As you go, as you go past, it's because I lived there from 84 till 1999.
wow.
And I know people that actually worked over there in the Job Corps and went to Job Corps, but that whole area has not been developed to its potential. And they're
Wow.
looking at this being more of, I was on the site while we're talking, because I can't really spew out all this information without reading it, right? So I'm looking at it, and, and Laura said something interesting last year where when you looked at the one of the federal government sites, and on development being projects near highways or public transportation areas, right? It was with the Department of Transportation. And so I think that's an interesting way of looking at where this acreage is and writing up this, feasibility study, plead the case because of where this area is located,
There's a article in the Tribune today, and I'll send it to you. And it's from a railroad kind of perspective, it's like, you know, Chicago is this hub of railroads, but they're ignoring it. And the communities are up in arms because of the diesel trucks and the increased truck traffic. And it's like shippers aren't taking advantage of the railroad infrastructure that already exists. They're ignoring it. And so it's an interesting, you know, it's interesting to think about teaming up with the railroad.
But you know, art plays, I just sent Eliza, do you have that link that I sent you on, you know, like placemaking? They're doing this whole tour across the United States and
Yeah, I'll pull that up. Hang on.
yeah, and addressing communities, you know, the municipalities, the governments, the community-based organizations, artists that live and work around the railroad area. You know what I mean? And they're looking at how they could take federal dollars or turn those into placemaking opportunities around railroad yards. So I go for it. I just stopped that conversation. I thought you had something to say, Liza. There it is. So. So you want to pull that up, Laura? You're finished with that, with
Yes.
your PowerPoint. Okay, great.
You want me to stop?
Yeah, and if Liza could pull up that placemaking, there we go. Since you brought up trains, this is what I participated in Placemaking USA just like when they were international as well. And last year their whole focus was on parking lots, you know, and converting parking lots into people places in placemaking. But here they're saying that they're only going to focus on 10 towns, right? And looking at Main Street managers, artists, historians, foundation, grantees, students, academics, you know, so forth, so on. You can see it right here. But I thought that was pretty interesting when I opened their email this morning and read what they're trying to do with these like 10 model cities. You know, I don't know if the city of Sacramento, the city of Chicago, because of the trains, and like you said, the network of trains that are coming through here, and you know, if it's anything like what I've been enduring the last 2 weeks with this infrastructure change on 47th Street, where they've dug these trenches out here to put the, you know, like they're installing cyber stuff out there. And it's at night, the trucks come through this corridor and they run over that metal plate. So it's like knocking. You know what I mean? And we're not far from the trains, you know, down near the Dan Ryan with Metra, and then with the, you know, the Amtrak and other trains that come through here. So we're just sandwiched between these trains that come through. It's ridiculous. But you become, those become part of the horizontal landscape, and you really don't hear them. You know, you get used to not paying attention, but those metal plates out there are crazy. So I could see where this community is like going crazy with those trains and tracks going through there. But anyway, I thought this was interesting in terms of what Placemaking USA wants to do now with exploring this whole, you know, building community around trains, you know, and Sacramento has that hub downtown, but also the trains come through the community, and it's not a lot of buildup. I think it is a lot of buildup because that super train is coming through that corridor as well, that they've been working on for like 10 years now.
So these are not commuter trains you're talking about?
Ooh, this says trains. So
because there's been for a while and continues to be a push for what's called TOD or ETOD, transit-oriented development and equitable development, but it's focused on transit orientation around various forms of transportation, often including trains, but for like for pedestrians, for people who can go to work or can come into town for cultural tourism or those sorts of things, not the commercial trains. And there's funding.
So you get city support money, you get to build more units, fewer parking spaces. So there's a lot of incentives to build close to or within walking distance of public transportation. But if there's also federal money is what I mentioned a couple months ago. And the Greater Auburn Development Corporation tapped into this money because they organized the community around building a new metro stop that would give everybody access to jobs. So it's a long term. It takes a lot of organizing, a lot of writing, but it's very fruitful. So they're the local leaders in managing that kind of federal funding. But if you want to do case studies about partnerships, that would be an interesting thing to do.
Great idea. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, hello
How are you?
everyone. Glad to be here today. I just really like what you guys are putting together for this housing for artists. I think it's wonderful. And I've been to a couple of the like forum kind of meetings that was put together by Kiela and Laura. And I saw some of the people that were there who were also artists. So my question is, maybe I missed it. I came in a little late. It's like maybe what are your next steps? And then also, since I did a lot of community outreach in the past in my other job, how do you see making artists not only aware but prepared to take advantage of housing like the cooperative housing? And because I hear that it's really specific, meeting some specific needs, and it's also holistic as well when we're talking about the sense of community. So is there a need, another question is there a need to prepare artists, because we can all be like in our little silos, and it may not be until the building is actually built that some of the artists will say, hey, I want to do that. So do you guys think in terms of ways to prepare artists for this type of living arrangement, even if they don't go into your specific housing project? There still sounds like there has to be a frame, a thinking frame that this is what you want as an artist. And I don't know if all artists think that way yet. I know that maybe when it's time for them to move, then they think about housing. But, those are, I don't know if I'm asking for an answer or just commenting, but I just really like the concept that you're putting together. And I know that it's going to be very, very useful. And then I also like to hear the talking about the communes, because I also was in that hippie stage. I went to SIU. In fact, that's a pretty, they had communes. I mean, the old school communes.
What's old school?
Well, where you were on a farm and they had a pump for getting water. They were growing marijuana. So when I heard a commune, I thought of that. But I know that meanings change and so needs change. And I just hear, and what I'm hearing is that there really is a need, and it's going to be a growing need to think of communal living
Mhm.
in whatever form it takes. So I just, our artists really in tune to that need that they have now or that they'll eventually need, and will that make it easier for your project to get the right people in those spots, instead of just renting it out to any and everybody, because it's really a way of thinking, actually, and how do you prepare people to think like that? And it's necessary, it really is. So that was just my comments and thought as I was listening, but it's really great. I'm really happy that you're putting this together for the artists.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for the recording.
Yeah.
And I've been able to use our recordings with the California Arts Council, has a some grants that are available, but they're looking for people to do professional development. And so I just feel like our pop-up research station cafe, where it lands on YouTube, is a resource that we can use when we're applying for things, because it's all recorded and everything. So, I put us in this conversation with the community investment that I just kind of posted over here. Yeah, and one of those conversations, I made sure that our name was part of an application, down in LA. So.
Well, I also shared in the chat, LISC is hosting a webinar March 9th about community, the community ownership through real estate. And the title of it is Propelling a Movement Beyond a Moment. But they're producing this in partnership with the Center for Land Trust Innovation. And so if you go to lisc.org, they've got some papers about, which is I haven't read them yet, but they're pretty succinct place of data and recent, proven the economics of community developing in this way. It's what you got to do to convince the folks with the bottom line that you got to include people first.
There it is, I see it.
Yeah.
I think you put it in here. I don't see the link to it though. You just put sponsoring the webinar.
Yeah, I got it as an email, so I don't want a MailChimp link, but if you go to lisc.org and look for that resource, they will, I think, send you an invitation. You can sign up for the webinar.
Okay. On March 9th, I will be in Oakland, California, March 8th through the 11th, presenting with the California Association of Museums, a case study with Sojourner Truth African Heritage Museum, and agile workforce, creating an agile workforce. So I'll try. I'm gonna be at that conference. I'll probably go back and look at the online webinar they put on YouTube, kind of visited there.
Right. I think it's only an hour.
I found the link. I put it in the chat, the direct link to that event.
Okay.
Are you raising your hand, Maximum?
Yes, I was. Yeah. Well, just like whenever it's time to share, that's all.
Yeah. Did you put your email, your website and everything in the chat?
Me? No, yes. Shall I? I'll
Good.
do that. Okay.
Your contact information.
Okay, I'll do it. So I'll do it right after I speak. I can't talk and type at the same time. I've tried. So I was going to respond to Rhonda's question. So I learned so much, Alpha, when you shared about what happened with the building, where it was the intention for artists to inhabit this building, but that's not what would happen, because that share that you shared about the list of qualified appropriate tenants wasn't existing at the time the building was ready for tenants. And I wrote that down and I thought, well, what am I going to do about that? And I instantly realized how I'm going to handle the outreach and preparing artists for this opportunity. The best and most impressive community building efforts I've ever seen has come from the NFT community. And so I also know that there's so many Web3 grants available. And there's so many wonderful blockchains aside from Bitcoin and Ethereum. There's lots of blockchains. And so I was thinking that I would make my offerings available through NFT ownership. And this would also solve people like actually accessing the actual physical property. I could be maybe one of the first physical buildings to integrate blockchain technology into accessing the property. And I could probably get some grants for that as well. And so that's how I'm imagining being maybe one of the first token gated artist residency communities, because NFT ownership has been it's been amazing to see how quickly communities are built around something even simple like an art project. So I just see so much synergy there. So that's how I'm thinking about going about it, is through NFT ownership, outreach, those types of things. Basically handling this kind of like the way I see people do NFT projects that have a greater mission. So that's my plan.
Please put your info in the chat. I want to talk to you about that. That was part of, because I know we
Okay.
have a couple minutes. That was actually a question I had and part of what I included in a fellowship I had last year, but didn't really make progress on that. But I'm still really interested to see how we can potentially use that as an alternative source, either of fundraising or ownership or leverage for creatives to be able to have revenue. I mean, on a lot of levels, but I don't understand it enough. So I feel like if I was to enter that, I'd just get taken advantage of because I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
And no one will take advantage of you because I'll get them. But
Jack Thank you. I got your that's your website, right?
yeah, Mirror is like a publishing site that we use in quote unquote Web3. And so, and you can mint NFTs and all kinds of other stuff. But yeah, talk to Maximilian, incredible educator. And there's probably some other people I can connect with, like Kift and Cabin Dow, who are doing like similar things. Cabin Dow is like more like a tech residency where they go to these different cabins. They have a few locations. One of them is near Austin. Yeah. And people can work on their projects and be in community with other people working on things. So yeah.
Cool.
That sounds amazing, Natalie. That
Both
sounds
have
amazing. Cabin Dow?
Yeah, Cabin Dow. Both have a grant, right? I say grant loosely. Not and so I'll send you the links via Telegram.
Thank you so much.
All right, y'all. Well, I know this is a lunchtime meeting, but I haven't had my lunch, so
Me too.
I'm hungry. It looks, oh yeah, okay. There's all the links. Thank you.
Prompt at 1. We still have a few more seconds. If anybody has some last words, any topics for next month, please join us every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Central. Thank you for joining us.
sounds like a train crash at the end.
Pots and pans.
Oh,